Hi everyone, this is Nick Pollock here from Roar Lions Roar. While you're here, be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that alert bell so you never miss any of our new content. And if you prefer to listen instead of watch, make sure you check us out on your podcast platform of choice where you can subscribe and download each new episode. Thanks for watching and thanks for listening. Go State!
Hi, everyone. Welcome to this edition of Roar Lions Roar. I'm your host, Bill DeFilippo, joined tonight by my co-host, Matt Filipovitz. And Matt, we made it.
Bill, it's game week. It's currently 100 degrees outside, which has me feeling some kind of way because last year, if you remember in the lead up to the West Virginia game, it was like high 80s, and I even then thought it was too hot. So it feels like football season in like the worst way possible. But I'm excited that we finally get maybe one of the games this year I'm most looking forward to. Not even because it's the opener, but because I think this is going to be such a banger of a game.
Yeah, it's been it's been very hard to focus on things this week. Partially because it's been so goddamn hot that I can't think straight, but more importantly because we're back. Penn State football is back. Like the game that we have been waiting for since like it was obvious they were not going to beat Ole Miss. We've been sitting here waiting for this moment specifically. Saturday afternoon at noon on Fox, Penn State heads to Morgantown, takes on West Virginia. It's a game that, coming off of the heels of last year's game, Matt, where obviously it's hard for a season opener to go any better in terms of the performance, in terms of the final score, in terms of the environment, in terms of the excitement that it ginned up, all these sorts of things. I would like it to be as close to last year's game as humanly possible. What do you think?
I think it'd be cool if Penn State again won 38-15. I'm debating back and forth on if it would be funnier if Penn State barely didn't cover the spread this year, or if similar to last year, if Bo Pribula tacks on another garbage time touchdown to put him over. I can't decide which one.
Yeah, they got really mad about that this week, didn't they?
Yeah, I mean, listen, like
furious.
Yeah, I get it. Like if that happens to you, you should use that as bulletin board material. Also, like I saw some random dude on YouTube, which first of all, like the YouTube algorithm has really got me all kinds of messed up because it's all like random dudes similar to us who are just like not plugged in. It seems like some guy made a comment that Penn State left their starters in and was throwing on the final drive when they scored. And I'm like, that's not remotely what happened. Like the twos got run. It was Bo Pribula's really first game action, and the kid scored. Like, sorry, that you played to the whistle. Like, if West Virginia did it to Penn State, I would say hat tip, good for you. Like, I am very curious to see what kind of bad blood has since permeated in this rivalry, and I think it's a good thing for Penn State. Like, historically, this is a hostile rivalry, and I'm excited that these two fan bases feel, the way they feel towards each other right now. I think it's really fun.
Yeah, I mean, I believe I've expressed this opinion on the pod plenty of times. This goes to Penn State also, because there have been some games, against Michigan in the Big House primarily, where they've gotten their asses kicked and the opposing team has scored late touchdowns. I think it's more patronizing if the opposing team goes, "Oh, you poor little babies, you just can't stop us. We're going to take it easy on you now after you had an onside kick and used all three of your time. We're just going to treat you like the little babies you are and show you no respect at all by acknowledging the fact that you can't stop. Like, go out there and make a play."
Reps are reps,
all of a
dude.
sudden, reps are, like you become better football players because you get onto the field in those situations. But apparently there are people in West Virginia looking for a reason to get mad who don't want their players to become better football players. And the funny thing is, West Virginia ended up having a really good season.
Great team last year, man.
Last
Should have
year,
won 10 games.
Yeah, going into last season, their coach Neil Brown was very much on the hot seat. When WVU ended up getting him from Troy, it was considered a coup. He was one of the biggest, brightest up-and-coming coaches in college football, winning double-digit games 3 of his 4 years at Troy. 5-7, 6-4, 6-7, 5-7. Gets on the hot seat, but ends up saving his job with a 9-4 campaign. They finished the year with a win in the Duke's Mayo Bowl over North Carolina, finished the year ranked 25th in the country, and are coming into this game looking looking to build on that, even if that is not win 9 games again, even if that's not compete for a championship in the Big 12, which they have the potential to
Oh, I think they
do.
can compete in the Big
But
12, 100%.
right. I more mean like, compete to win the Big 12 is a really tall
Yeah.
task, even with all the like moving parts that have
Mhm.
happened in the Big 12. There are a lot of teams, a lot of really good teams in that conference. And even if they're just a half step down from all of that, the more that you read and you watch and you listen to people talking about this football team, Matt, last year, I think we went into the game very, very confident that Penn State would just be able to go out there and, not have too big of a challenge. This is a WVU team, even beyond the fact that this game is happening in Morgantown, that has the potential to give Penn State a hard time.
100%. Garrett Greene can play. That quarterback is a ball player. Donaldson's a good running back. The backup, whose name's escaping me right now, he can play too. The defense, I have my question marks, but if you got a quarterback, you got a chance. And I think Garrett Greene is one of the better quarterbacks Penn State is going to face this fall.
Yeah, Greene is a very interesting quarterback. He's a guy that we're going to end up talking about quite a bit as we get into talking about Penn State's defense. In this game, last year's game 16 for 27, 162 yards, 15 rushes, 71 yards, and a score on the ground. But before we get into talking about this game, Matt, more specifically looking at the offense, looking at the defense, what are just the general vibes you have going into this game? How are you feeling about it on like the big picture level? And if we're sitting there at 3 p.m. on Saturday and the game is all finished, you won't feel good if Penn State loses, obviously. But do you want to just see Penn State win this game? Do you want to see Penn State win this game in a specific way? Is there anything about this game that you really want out of Penn State? Or is this just simply go into a hostile environment, survive? I don't care about the score. I don't care about the performance. Just pick up the win.
So 3 of the past 4 years, Penn State has started on the road against a Power 5 opponent. Indiana, Wisconsin, Purdue. The one game they played at home, West Virginia last year, I think you could ask to see a little bit more. But in these road games where you're going into a hostile environment with a team that I think can compete in their conference for a championship, survive in advance. Survive, make it out of Morgantown in one piece. I don't like this idea that people are saying, like, maybe Andy Kotelnicki doesn't need to, use every tool in his tool chest here. Throw the kitchen sink at him. Like, it's a 12-team playoff now. Like, you can afford to show your hand a little bit more because every game not matters a little bit less, but there is a little bit more wiggle room here. So I want to see Penn State go out there, execute really well, show what they're able to do against a Power 5 opponent, and then anything from there, like things that I think need to really be focused on, cannot be fixed during the middle of this game. Just do what you're doing well, and then get the hell out of there, and then spend the next 2 weeks against MAC opponents as a chance to go out there and fix those mistakes. So, like, if they win and Drew Aller throws 3 picks and the offense fumbles twice, and if they still get a win, I'm going to say that's a great win. As long as they make it out in one piece, everything else you can fix later on. Just get out of the Power 5 opponents' home turf unscathed, which I think is just going to be a tall task this week.
Yeah, the tricky thing about this game for me is that I can sit here and say I want to see Penn State's passing offense. That's the big thing that I think everyone's going to be focusing on in this game, throughout the entire season. I could sit here and say I want to see Penn State's passing offense look different, look like it's taking a step forward, look more explosive, look more of this, look more of that, blah, 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 blah. But I think even in saying that, Penn State's passing offense had its best, most explosive, most impressive game against West Virginia at home last year. And like, I can already see if Drew goes out there and completes, 65% of his passes for 300 yards, 10 yards per attempt, 3 touchdowns, no pick, something like that. I will be sitting there on Sunday with these headphones on in this room with this microphone, talking to you, talking to everyone who listens. And I can already see myself saying, well, he did this last year against West Virginia. We need to sit here and wait. Like, I think more than anything, yes, I would there's a good chance we get to halftime in this football game, and I'm sitting there going, just survive and get out of here. If it ends 24-21, I'm happy. Just get out of here with the win.
Mm-hmm.
But going into the game, Matt, I'm not worried about Penn State's defense too terribly much, which is pretty funny because the best unit that West Virginia has in this game is going to be going up against Penn State's defense. And we will discuss that in a little bit. I want to see Penn State's offense go out there and just have a real businessman-like approach to this. I want to see them playing with a little bit of confidence. I want to see them playing with a little bit of swagger. I want to see a team that is going out there and taking care of business and doesn't look like, and this is obviously an impossible thing to, like, what's the word I'm looking for? It's obviously an impossible thing to sit here and say, like, to quantify, to describe, whatever. But I want them to carry themselves like they belong in the top tier of college football. I want them to go out there, and you can do that, obviously, in a game where you have to scratch and claw and win. But if they can go out and look like a team that puts their hand on West Virginia's forehead, says, go ahead and try and throw a punch because we know you can't reach us, I'm going to feel really good about where this Penn State team is.
Can I make a quick comment, Bill, on the receivers that you mentioned before I forget real quick? You made that comment about, like, if Aller completes 65% of his passes, blah, 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 you're not going to feel like anything's really turned the corner because of what happened last year. I think there's a couple specific things. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I can imagine myself being in that situation now. Right. I can imagine, like, a lot of it comes down to how comfortable Drew looks. How does Trey Wallace look like a wide receiver one? Are they finding interesting ways to get Nick Singleton involved in the passing game? But, if they pick up a couple of chunk plays and otherwise Drew's footwork doesn't look great, or he's doing the thing where it's like, oh my God, 1, oh my God, 2, oh my God, 3, oh my God, I have to throw this ball away, or I have to tuck and run for 2 yards. I'm not going to feel great even if he has a good game. But if he looks loose, cool, calm, relaxed, like he's not letting everything get to him, which seemed like it was his big problem last year.
Especially on the road.
I do think, especially on the road, I do think that will be a little bit different.
So the receivers can show me 2 things this week that'll make me think they turned a corner over this past offseason. Number 1, know the play. That cannot be any more paramount.
Yeah.
Don't go Dante Cephas mode and be blocking when you're the primary read. No disrespect to a college kid, but that happened a lot. Know the playbook. Understand where you're supposed to be. Know when it's a run play. Know when it's a pass play. Very basic stuff that we didn't get last year. And number 2, catch the football. Trey Wallace had some bad drops in that game last year. I think Cephas had one. Again, that West Virginia stat line for Aller was phenomenal. I think like 4 of his passes that were incomplete were drops. Catch the ball. You do those 2 things, I feel like we can talk about these receivers differently as early as like this time on Saturday. So that's where my head's at on that front. But again, my primary goal is just get out. Just get out unscathed, and you can fix what you need to fix against the MAC teams. And, with what I think is going to be the lower, rung of the Big Ten coming to Happy Valley next couple weeks after that.
Yeah, I mean, that's... again, there is a world where we are sitting here at halftime at the end of the game where I'm just really happy it's survive and advance. I've mentioned before, I don't think Penn State's going to be a national championship contender, and or going to win the national championship. And, it's a point that I've been thinking about early, throughout this week, but like, we don't know what college football is going to look like at the end of this season. And it's very possible that you could be a 9-3 team, and that is what a 10-2 team used to be in the past, or you could be a 10-2 team. That's like all these sorts of things where I'm not too worried about, I'm willing to sit and wait and see how this impacts the rest of the season, what the rest of the season looks like, and what we feel, be willing to be patient to like come to full conclusions about whether this Penn State season is going to be a success or a failure or whatever. But ultimately, that's just what I want. I want to see Penn State take a business-like approach to this football game. I don't want it to be, we're going to compare it to previous season openers. I don't want it to be like the Wisconsin game where the entire game was just white knuckling it, and
rock fight.
They forget to cover Jahan Dotson one time, and that ended up deciding the entire football game, right? Like, I don't want it to be a game like that. if it is a game like the Purdue game where both of the teams are, maybe not as dramatic as the Purdue game, but where both of these teams are throwing punches and Penn State showing it can respond to getting hit in a way that it hasn't in the past, I'd be able to live with that. But ultimately, the closer it is to last year's West Virginia game, or the closer it is to, insert game here where Penn State just went out and took care of business, I'm going to be really happy. Any final thoughts before I pay some bills for us and then we dive into, both sides of the football?
No, I'm just amped for this game. Like I'm super pumped that this
Same,
game is
man.
happening. Like it's cool that this is the premier game to start the first Saturday of college football season. Like I know there's some games on Thursday. I know there's bigger games on Saturday, but like this being the one to kick off a college football Saturday and college football season, more or less, is really cool. So, amped for it.
Is Big Noon? Big Noon is going to
be there, baby.
All right, yeah, I'm excited to listen to Urban Meyer mumble his way through his takes. Anyway, we're going to talk more about football, and maybe I'll do an Urban Meyer impression at some point. But before we do that, we want to thank our sponsor of Home Field Apparel. They've been sponsoring us since we decided to go podcast only. A couple of years ago, they've been nothing but great to us. Penn State fans have always made it a point to purchase things from Home Field Apparel, and it makes sense why they would. You take one look at Home Field Apparel's website, at just how much time and effort and energy they put into making sure college athletics fans get the best gear that they could possibly get for their alma mater. Like, it's obvious, no matter what you want, whether it's a t-shirt, whether it's a sweatshirt, whether it's a crew neck, whether it's
bomber
a
jackets
bomber
are
jacket.
Cool. New bomber jackets just dropped. I saw them tweeted out earlier today.
They did.
More schools got their bomber jackets.
Yeah,
those are really cool.
I was actually really excited, Matt, because I was going to wear my bomber jacket on Saturday and have that be like, yeah, man, like start of the football season, we're going to wear something cool from Home Field Apparel. I'm going to wear the bomber. It's actually, the heat looks like it's going to break and it's going to be 83 on Saturday. So
if you're in a bomber jacket in 83 degree heat, Bill, that you're going to be sweating bullets no matter what. That's still not time yet.
Brother, it's the first Penn State game of the season. I'm going to be sweating bullets no matter what.
That's a good point.
But regardless, I'm going to be wearing Home Field Apparel gear on Saturday. I'm sure Matt's going to be wearing Home Field Apparel gear on Saturday. I'm sure a lot of you are going to be wearing Home Field Apparel gear on Saturday. But maybe you don't have any Home Field Apparel gear. Maybe you want to get your hands on some, maybe before the game. But as we're going through this Penn State football season, just freshen up the old wardrobe a bit. I mean, I'm currently wearing a shirt from when College Game Day came in 2017. So Lord knows I can use a freshening up of my wardrobe. And if you want to do that and you never purchase anything from Home Field Apparel before, use the promo code RLR24 for 15% off of your first order. Once again, use the promo code RLR24 for 15% off of your first order. Thank you, Home Field Apparel, as always, for sponsoring the podcast. Let's get back to talking about this football game. And Matt, I want to start with the easier thing here. Well, maybe not even the easier thing, but one of the more interesting side of the football to me, the better chess match, I think, is what happens when West Virginia has the football.
I'm so fascinated
because West Virginia, like, their passing attack, it's okay. They have a really good tight end in Cole Taylor. Their quarterbacks aren't the best passers in the world, but when they have to run the football, they are really, really good at doing it. And I was thumbing through Phil Steele's preview magazine earlier today. He has them as projected the number 6 rushing offense in America. So what are you going to be looking out for when West Virginia has the football in this?
So there's two things here too. And there may be two things that I am most interested in on the field as a whole that I feel like we can find answers for. Again, the receivers, it's going to be baby steps, but I feel like we can make broad assumptions of the Penn State defense based upon two things in this game. Number one is the defensive tackles. This is a very old, very experienced unit. It's basically the same exact unit that Penn State had last year, but Zane Durant has gotten a lot better, and Devon J. Thomas was playing his best football down the stretch. And Alonzo Ford's back in the mix. Hakeem Beamon is still here. Keziah Izzard is still here. I want to see if without Zach Frazier manning the center position for West Virginia, if the Penn State defensive tackles can be the most disruptive unit on the field. Now, that doesn't mean the most splash plays. I think Denai Dennis-Sutton and Abdul Carter are going to be responsible for that. But if these defensive tackles, which again are like 23 and 24-year-old men, can clog a lot of rushing lanes, I think it's going to create headaches, especially for a guy like CJ Donaldson, a converted tight end who makes his money running in between the tackles. So right there, I'm fascinated to see that. And on the other side of it, last year, Garrett Greene, would you say, Bill, he had like 9 carries for 70-something odd yards? A pretty good clip considering sacks are also factored in college football. So he can definitely scoot. With the shift now from the 4-3 under Manny Diaz to the 4-2-5, having 3 safeties on there, I'm curious to see how they play quarterback run. Because frankly, like Penn State has kind of gotten burned by quarterback run, especially back to the Brent Pry years, historically under James Franklin. So with the 4-2-5 now in place, with Jalen Reed playing up closer to the line of scrimmage, I'm curious to see how they handle when Garrett Greene says, oh my God, no one's open. I can scoot myself forward for 7 yards and move the sticks. If he has to think twice now with a more athletic player like Jalen Reed out there, as opposed to, like, no disrespect, Dom DeLuca. So those are the 2 things I'm really interested in watching.
Yeah, I for me, so much of what makes this interesting, like you mentioned, it's just how Penn State holds up in the trenches against a very good, one of the best offensive lines in the country. Again, Phil Steele, and his ranking of offensive line units of West Virginia is the number 11 group in the
that
nation.
Millen kid can play.
They lost
that tackle.
That
dude can play.
Wyatt Millen, their left tackle, is going to be an NFL guy. They have veterans throughout their offensive line. I think the number was something like 113 combined starts, which even with Zach Frazier, and I believe they lost one other player up front moving on, they have a ton of talent coming back. The guy they actually have replacing Frazier, who was their All-American center, who I believe is now at the Pittsburgh Steelers, is a guy named is a guy named Brandon Yates, who started and got time at all 3 spots along the interior last year.
Hunter Norzad,
so it's not like they're going to be replacing him. Yeah, it's not like they're going to be replacing him with someone who has no experience on the offensive line. You go left to right, it looks like it's going to be senior, redshirt, junior, redshirt, senior, redshirt, senior, redshirt, senior. So a lot of veteran presence up there, a group that they're going to lean on to open things up for their pair of running backs. Like you mentioned, Donaldson got the most carries of anyone in their backfield. He's a junior, big, nasty, physical running back. He was at 6'2", 238. Not a guy who is easy to just take down on your own. And then Jaheim White from York, Pennsylvania. He was a freshman last year. Only had 109 carries, but actually led the team in rushing with 842 rushing yards, 7.7 yards per carry.
He didn't play much in that Penn State game.
No. He was still getting used to life in college football at that point. And then Greene, better with his legs than with his arm. 120 carries, 772 yards, and led the team with 13 touchdowns. To me, like, I'm not too terribly worried. Well, I'm as worried as I would normally be about a quarterback who can run in the passing game. But for me, having that extra option in the passing game, in the running game, when you have at least one of Donaldson or White back there and you're going to be keying in on him, Greene is a really savvy runner, really good at understanding when to keep it, when to pull it, when he's going to be the one who's able to pick up yards on the ground. And it's funny, he had their second longest rush on the year last year at 48 yards. So he is capable of busting big plays in the rushing game as well. So Penn State's defensive line is going to have a big afternoon, an important afternoon ahead of it, bottling up that run, making it so their linebackers, their safeties are able to get to guys as they get to the line of scrimmage. I'm keeping a very close eye on Abdul Carter here because, like you mentioned, defensive tackles, they're going to be in a battle all game, but I'm not too worried about them, like, not knowing what they're going up against. Denai Dennis-Sutton, to an extent, it's going to be new to him playing this volume of snaps, but he's a guy who knows that position. I'm very interested in how Abdul Carter is in run defense in his first game as a defensive end. If he's just pinning his ears back and trying to get into the backfield all game, and there are running lanes that open up as a result of that, Penn State's defense might get gashed in the running game, and they might target Carter over and over and make sure they're not in situations where he could do what he is actually unbelievable at, which is pinning his ears back and getting to the quarterback. So that to me, the more that Penn State is able to bottle up this West Virginia rushing attack, which it's going to be very difficult to do.
Would you hate if Tony Rojas was just a spy game on Garrett Greene? An athletic guy like that? I don't know if
it would be. Maybe. We'll see.
Okay.
Because that's more of a thing for passing downs, right? And passing downs, we'll have to see how they decide to approach those. But if they're just disciplined in the running game and the defensive tackles are able to, two of them are able to occupy three blockers and the edges aren't getting too far upfield, like there's a chance that Penn State could have a good afternoon on the ground in this game. The big thing is Penn State can't let West Virginia be able to build its play action game off of that, throw the ball off of that. Because the thing with West Virginia is, again, they have a very good tight end in Cole Taylor. Their number one receiver last year, former future Penn Stater Devin Carter, has since moved on to the NFL. They've brought a lot of guys back from last year's team, Matt, but it wasn't a particularly productive passing offense, but it was one that was able to go out and find big plays in the passing game.
Yeah, I think the secondary is kind of going to take care of itself. I trust Terry Smith and Anthony Poindexter that much. Again, the defensive front has to create chaos, and then it's on Kobe King and Tony Rojas to be very disciplined, keep their eye on the football, keep their eye on Garrett Greene to make sure he doesn't tuck and run for 13 yards a million times. And if they can do that, I like Penn State's odds to cause a lot of headaches. And again, West Virginia did a great job not turning the ball over against Penn State last year. That is hard to do, to not turn the ball over against a Manny Diaz defense in a night game on the road. They pulled it off. So I think they're going to be very smart when they take their shots. And if the opportunity comes to make a play, these guys have to be ready to make a play.
I agree. And one thing that really was the case last year was Greene. He struggled in that game, 16 for 27, 162 yards, 6 yards per attempt. Their long in the passing game was 37 yards. Got better as the year went on. A lot better. Wasn't super accurate for most of the season, but his passer rating by month, September 139.6, October 137.4, November 146.8, December 149.8. Again, accuracy, not really his strong suit, or wasn't his strong suit for much of last year. But unlike last year, where he needed a couple of games to get up and running, to really grab that job by the scruff of the neck. His backup, Nico Marchiol, is a guy that I know a lot of people in West Virginia are super high on. He's going to be coming in knowing what this Penn State defense is, being a little bit more established in the world of college football, a little bit more confidence, a little better understanding of what the West Virginia passing attack is. And I don't think, Matt, they're going to nickel and dime Penn State's defense. I don't think they're going to try and dink and dunk on them. But I do think they are going to try with Cole Taylor, with their top returning receiver, Hudson Clement, who Clement's 6'1", 198. He's a younger dude. Preston Fox, Clement's a sophomore. Preston Fox is a junior. Traylon Ray is a sophomore, so a young unit, but a potentially explosive unit. If they could all take one kind of big step forward coming off of last year, and they can find big plays in the passing game, it's almost not going to matter how inaccurate, inefficient, whatever you want to say, Garrett Greene is going to end up being. If they can get their passing game, open up those big plays, suddenly Penn State's defense has to back up a bit, suddenly becomes a bit easier for them to run the ball. All these things can kind of complement one another and make this a really difficult afternoon for Penn State. But if you bottle up that deep passing game, I think Penn State is going to be able to bottle up the run to an extent, about as well as you can.
Mhm.
And I could actually see it being a difficult game for West Virginia moving the ball. I don't know if it will, but I could see that happen.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, this is a Penn State defense that should get the benefit of the doubt. Like, no matter where your allegiance lies, you can't deny that this Penn State defense was phenomenal last year. And a lot of those pieces, especially up front, like, I know you're losing to Disa, I know you lost Chop, but again, Kobe King is back, Tony Rojas is back, Abdul Carter is still here. Like, it's very easy to see a scenario where this front is just as disruptive. And I think, if I was a West Virginia fan, I would be nervous about it too.
Yeah, 23rd in offensive SP plus for WVU, so should be one of the better units in the country. Penn State's going to have to be, if Penn State shows up from the moment the game starts, and Penn State is playing with his hair on fire from the moment the game starts, and their defensive tackles are able to take care of things, take care of things in the middle of the offensive line. Carter doesn't get too lost in the sauce in the running game. I generally trust the rest of it is going to take care of itself. But this is, they're a good unit. They're one that can end up giving Penn State some problems. And then you move to the other side of the football, where West Virginia 54th in defensive SP plus coming into the season, bringing back 5 starters from a defense that wasn't particularly great last year. I don't want to say Penn State should be able to put up numbers on them because, frankly, they might just take the approach of, we need to get out of here without our defense having too many troubles, and without our offense having to do too terribly much, without putting too terribly much on Drew. We might just need to lower our heads, run the damn football, get out of here in one piece. Also, one thing I forgot to mention, West Virginia, while they are 3rd in returning production on offense, they are 95th in returning production on defense.
Wow.
So bit of a blank slate, Matt.
Yeah. But again, for a pretty mid defense last year,
yeah.
that's fine.
Yeah, one thing about bringing guys back is if they're not particularly good, you don't want to bring them back. And they're going to play that 3-3-5 defense. They have to replace their top 4 sack guys from last year. They have to replace their best defensive back from last year, and a guy named Beanie Bishop. Bringing in some transfers at cornerback. It is a unit that, when I talked earlier about wanting to see Penn State have some swagger, Penn State take care of business, it's a game on the road to start your season against a Power 5 opponent in what is going to be a revved up environment.
Again,
I'm not expecting Penn State to go out there 600 yards of total offense, 50 points. It's over by the 3rd quarter. I'm not expecting anything like that. But this is a unit, Matt, that if Penn State has taken a step forward and has developed under Andy Kotelnicki to the point that it can compete with better teams, it should be able to move the ball and score.
Yeah, you should be able to move the ball against this if you are what we think you are, if you're the Penn State offense. And what we think the Penn State offense is, at least from my perspective, is a team that can be very efficient running the football, and when the opportunities come to take those deep shots, are finally willing and able to try to push the ball down the field. Again, I think 2 shots deep a game probably sound about right. But if Penn State is going to get out of Morgantown, it is going to be through a heavy dose of Nick Singleton and Katron Allen. And again, heavy dose doesn't necessarily mean 24 carries each. It could mean 14 carries, 6 catches, 2 of those plays go for 30 plus yards. That's a humongous difference in the grand flow of a football game. So I'm expecting a big day out of Singleton, especially. I'll call my shot right now. I think he is going to have a longer run against West Virginia than he had in the entirety of last season. And a big part of that is, the 3-3-5. It's going to be easier for him to get to that second level. And then I feel confident Kotelnicki will have schemed a way where he just has to beat one guy. And I trust Nick Singleton to beat a guy in space. So I think him and I think Katron Allen is going to be such an asset in the passing game to keep the defense on their toes. And I think if they're going to get out of Morgantown in one piece, those are the 2 guys you have to let drive this boat.
Why
I said drive a boat for a game in Morgantown, West Virginia, I don't know. Maybe I was thinking about Kodak Black, but I'm sticking by it.
I doubt that's what you were doing, but I'm inclined to give you the benefit of the doubt of this one on this one. Yeah, I think that the big way that, the fail safe for Penn State in this football game, in the event the passing offense just isn't working, Drew is rattled, all this is that they're able to lean on those two running backs, and they're able to lean on Bo Prabula, and they're able to get that threat of the QB run that it seems like Drew is going to be providing this year. A little bit more of that, but it's still not going to be his kind of just natural
He's
thing.
never going to be Garrett Greene.
Suddenly, right, he's never going to be Garrett Greene. He's never going to be Bo Prabula. But fortunately, Penn State has Bo Prabula. I'm very interested in what happens with this West Virginia defensive line against Penn State's offensive line, because that 3-3-5 defense, a newer offensive line for Penn State. West Virginia has three starting guys along the defensive line. A guy by the name of Sean Martin, a 6'5", 295-pound senior, a nice football player for them. Only had 1 sack last year, off of having 4 sacks in 2022. I'm going to try and pronounce this. I'm probably going to mess this up. Edward Vesterinen, who is a Finnish defensive lineman, 6'3", 285-pound senior, who's one of their more productive defensive players.
Cool accent. Heard him talk
last
this week.
year.
He has a very cool accent.
Yeah, he was the guy who was like who's made a big stink out of Penn State scoring a late touchdown.
As he should have.
So yeah, sure, whatever makes you happy, man. And then finally, a Penn State transfer, Fatorma Mulba, 6'4", 306-pound senior, played a bit last year. That group, it's a veteran group in the trenches for WVU going up against a reworked Penn State offensive line. So even though West Virginia losing their top 4 players in terms of sacks last year, they lost a number of their top guys when it came to tackles. Anthony Wilson, a safety, is going to be back, but a few of the other guys who they've leaned on to pick up tackles last year are going to be gone. I say all that to say this: if Penn State's offensive line can just have a base layer of competency to them, particularly at the tackle spots, I trust Andy Kotelnicki to be able to find ways to have those 2 running backs move the football. And if those 2 running backs can move the football against what should be a better front 7 for West Virginia, maybe not, they're not going to be the 86 Bears or anything, but it should be a better front 7 for West Virginia. I think they will lean on that as much as they possibly can. But having said that, Matt, with how much of this season, this offseason, was about building up Drew Aller's confidence to get the best out of Drew Aller, I almost feel like, I don't want to say they want to put it all on his shoulders for him to win the game. That wouldn't be fair. You have to be able to run the ball, all that. But I almost feel like if after 8 months, whatever it is, of Drew has all the talent, we just got to build him up. We got to get him to a point where he knows how good he can be. If he goes out there and he throws the ball 20 times, unless we have an Auburn in 22 situation where it's like, oh, you're just not tackling these 2 running backs, I almost feel like it wouldn't be like doing right by him. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
I want to see them. I want to see them say, Drew, we know you can go out there and be that guy in this football game on the road in the exact sort of game state and situation that you struggled in last year. But
I don't think Aller is, and again, I don't know the kid, but like, I have a hard time believing that Aller, is not okay taking a back seat to your 2 NFL running backs in a game like this. So like, do I think Aller threw it 29 times last year? I would probably say on the road in what I think is going to be a close game, probably going to be around the 21 to 22 throw mark. Still a good amount of throws, still going to be a lot of opportunity for him to make plays. Bill, one thing that I don't think we've talked enough about, and I'm curious to get your thoughts on this. There is one team on the planet that I think has actually seen what Penn State has in Trey Wallace, and that team is West Virginia.
Yeah.
Trey Wallace had 7 catches for 72 yards last year. Keandre Lambert-Smith had the big splash plays. So yeah, like Trey Wallace, I think, is the guy who I am most curious to see how West Virginia plans for him and how Penn State uses him in the passing game.
Yeah, I mean, I jotted this down. 37% of Trey's receptions and 31.5% of his yards last season came against West Virginia. And all the reports out of camp basically say that he looks and is carrying himself like he could be the guy. Mm-hmm. Whether you can be the guy and whether you are the guy are obviously two very different things. But against a secondary that leaves a lot to be desired, their best defensive back from last year, Beanie Bishop, transfer, gone after a year. They've brought in a pair of transfer cornerbacks. One guy by the name of Garnett Hollis Jr., who a lot of Penn State fans probably saw this week. He was the guy who said Penn State only respects Ohio State and Michigan. And then Aiden Garnes from Duquesne, who was an all-conference player at Duquesne. They have the two of them at cornerback. They have a veteran safety, a guy named Anthony Wilson. And then they've a freshman named Josiah Jackson, who looks like he is slated to be the starter at the other safety spot. And in the event that Penn State is able to find some success going against a basically rebuilt defensive backfield, a big reason why is going to be Trey Wallace. A big reason why is going to be because, take last year's game out of it altogether. A big reason why is going to be because he is actually that guy. And if he can actually be that guy, and it then opens up things for everyone else in Penn State's passing attack, including those two running backs, using them, particularly Singleton, more in the passing game, like, I think Drew could have a big game. But of course, Matt, it's all going to come down to whether or not he's just able to kind of shake off those fight off those demons that he had on the road during his first year as a starter. Like, how concerned are you about Drew going into this one?
This is tough to say because I do think a lot of the cursed vibes surrounding Drew Aller and, like, broadly speaking, the Penn State program last year were primarily Mike Yurcich's fault, candidly. Like, definitely some of it was Drew, but I just think that, Yurcich didn't do many favors. I think Aller's going to be a lot more comfortable with the pieces around him than he was last year. I think Tyler Warren's a big part of that. Again, I think you had a stat, Bill. He dropped like 1 out of every 10 opportunities last year. If he cleans that up, I think that's such a reliable option to move the sticks. Liam Clifford, not a very explosive player that we've seen. I think he's quicker or faster than we give him credit for, but a guy who can move the sticks, reliable hands. So I think the fact that although Aller may not have that guy can go, or at least not that we know of, at least maybe it could be Trey Wallace, the guy who can go 60 yards, in a blink of an eye. But I think he now has enough pieces that he feels comfortable can get him 8 yards. And I think that's going to do wonders for his confidence. And I trust Kotelnicki then to scheme up ways to turn those 8-yard gains into like 38-yard gains. So definitely some nerves there with Drew, but again, I think you can grow up a lot between year 1 and year 2 as a starter, and it's a great opportunity for Drew to show that he's taken those steps.
Yeah, and it's worth mentioning that as the band Stained once famously said, it's been a while since Andy Kotelnicki's went up against West Virginia. They last WVU and Kansas played in 2022. In that game, Kansas don't have any. Let me see. Were any of these on defense?
Yes, the last one was.
Yes, they had a pick 6 in overtime.
A pick 6 in overtime to win it.
Win it, yeah. But their offense put up 49 points, 419 total yards in Morgantown against WVU, against Neil Brown's West Virginia. So Andy Kotelnicki has a little bit of experience. Again, it's been a minute since he's gone up against them. Kansas and WVU didn't play last year, but it's not like this is something that is going to be brand new to him. This environment, this style of team, a Neil Brown football team, all these sorts of things. So, just a little something I wanted to mention as we're kind of tying the bow on the offensive side of things. Let's get into X factors, Matt, on offense and on defense. Who are the players? What are the things that you think could end up tilting this thing, if it's a coin flip in Penn State's direction, if lean Penn State could make Penn State even more sizable favorite as we're entering this football game.
One thing I want to touch on, Sanders Zahadak of it all, the kicking situation for Penn State. This is a kid who came out there, and I'm rooting for the kid. Like, he's from the Lehigh Valley. Listeners know I'm from that area. You know, I want the kid to be successful. It would be cool to see him, after what happened last year where he missed those 2 bad kicks, to come back out there and deliver. But with that being said, that happened. Like, we have to acknowledge that that happened last year. And it would not surprise me if on like a 4th and 2, if, you know, last year that would have been Falcons territory, if this year they decide to go for it because of the history with Sanders Zahadak. So I'm just calling that out as a potential thing to watch throughout the course of this game. But in terms of X factors, I'll go defensively to start. And this isn't so much like player of the game. But I really am curious what can happen if AJ Harris is what we think he is, and if he is essentially able to erase one half of the field against a West Virginia receiving core that a lot of folks don't think is as talented as I'm sure what he went up against every single week in practice at Georgia for an entire year. Like, take out the Penn State of it all, but AJ Harris has been cutting his teeth against elite talent for a long time. So if AJ Harris can go out there and play a complete game in his first game in a Penn State uniform, I think that's a guy who can really change the tide in Penn State's favor defensively.
Yeah, he's a he's one of those guys that I don't think this is the game where if AJ Harris is that guy, it's going to like dramatically change everything. But having said that, if he is that guy, being able to bully West Virginia's pass, receivers and again, take away one side of the field is going to be really, really good. On defense, I'm going to go with Tony Rojas.
Great one.
Tony Rojas and Kobe King, because if Penn State's defensive line is able to give them opportunities to just tackle guys at the line of scrimmage, within 3 yards of it, whatever it is, they're going to have to be consistent in doing that. They cannot give all of the rushing options that West Virginia has opportunities to break big ones, because they are really good players and they will break big ones. And they're probably going to have to deal with Taylor in their tight end of the passing game. So those two really need to be on their game. Rojas looking like a dude from game one would be huge for Penn State for a lot of reasons. It would be especially huge here because he's going to be a guy that I think is going to be under a lot of pressure, is going to be targeted a lot, or is going to be a lot is going to be asked of him by West Virginia. Is going to be incumbent on him to do that. And then obviously Kobe King, he has a Jason Kabinda type performance and Ellisbrook type performance. That's going to be huge for Penn State in this one. And then when I move over to the offensive side of the football, I'm looking for literally anyone to be the other receiver, because the thing is, yes, Trey Wallace, 7 receptions, 72 yards. It was his best game last season. It was also Malik McLean's best game last season, 4 receptions, 58 yards, and a touchdown. It was also Keandre Lambert-Smith's best game last season, 4 receptions, 123 yards, 2 touchdowns. They need to find out who that second guy is. They need to make sure that Liam Clifford, if he is that second guy, can show it in this football game. They need to make sure if a guy like Julian Fleming, if a guy, we'll see what Caden Saunders' situation is with injuries, a guy like Amari Evans. Penn State had a lot of success throwing the ball last year against West Virginia. 2 of the reasons why they had a lot of success throwing the ball against West Virginia are no longer here. Right. So we need to see something out of Liam Clifford, out of Julian Fleming, out of Amari Evans, and then out of that big kind of like, when you look at Penn State's receivers room, if you want to put them in tiers, the number 1 tier is Trey Wallace. The number 2 tier on his own is Liam Clifford. He might be close to Wallace. The number 3 tier is Amari Evans and Julian Fleming. 3A is Caden Saunders, just because we don't know what he is yet as a college football player. And then it's just that big grab bag going into the season. And there's a lot of space for those guys behind Harrison Wallace to make moves up. WVU with a not great secondary, with a defense you could throw on a bit. Got to give Drew Aller opportunities to throw guys the football. So just someone's be the guy alongside Trey Wallace. And I think Penn State could win this game comfortably. Matt, going into this one, Penn State is an 8.5-point favorite, total of 51.5. SP Plus actually thinks both of those are a bit too low, has Penn State winning by 14 points and a total of 54, 34-20. What do you think? What do you think about those numbers? Do you think Penn State's going to be able to go into Morgantown and take care of business and pick up a win against a team that got a few votes in the preseason AP poll? Or do you think this is going to be a long afternoon?
Real quick, on the offensive point, this was actually broached to me by friend of the show, Stan. Bill, I'm not thinking it's going to happen, but I'm watching this. Nick Dawkins having an Anthony Wiggin, Wisconsin 2021 situation where he gets the nod, doesn't get the job done, and it's curtains. I don't think that's going to happen, but when you hear that Vega Ioane and Cooper Cousins have been snapping the ball, Vega especially, has me thinking that they're prepared for backup plans if Nick Dawkins can't get the job done. So I am going to be watching the center situation for Penn State very closely early on. And then for the thing people came here for, prediction time. Bill, I feel decent about Penn State in this game. I think Andy Kotelnicki was brought here to score points. I think he was brought here to develop this offense, to hit a ceiling that it was incapable of hitting under Mike Yurcich. And I think there's a floor that's been established for that Penn State defense throughout the James Franklin tenure. So I like Penn State to force a turnover or two. I think they're going to get a couple of fumbles. I think that if they get an early lead, which I think Penn State's going to get out to a bit of a lead to start, they can force Garrett Greene into making a couple of mistakes. And I think Penn State wins this one pretty comfortably. I'm going to go Penn State 34, West Virginia 17.
Yeah, I'm not that optimistic. I do think Penn State is going to win this game. I think Penn State is going to look like the better football team, but with how I think both offenses are going to primarily run the football. As much as I want them to get Drew going in the passing game, again, continue to build that confidence up, I think they're going to lean on their running game. And with how I think both offenses are going to do that, I think there's going to be a relatively low scoring game, at least compared to a total of 51.5. I do think Penn State wins this game. I do think they cover. I think it ends with something like 28-17 Penn State. I think if you told, they would be covering the spread. Penn State is very good at covering the spread, just historically under James Franklin. But I think if you told me 28-17, I think there's a way where people might think that doesn't sound like a particularly dominant performance by Penn State, but I think they're going to go out there and I think they're going to, I think they should be able to, again, find a little bit of joy against a not particularly great West Virginia defense, take their licks in the running game, try and dare West Virginia to throw the football. And if they dare West Virginia to throw the football, have a bit of success with turnovers, with not getting beaten by big plays, those sorts of things. So I was at 28-20. I will knock it down to 28-17. I think Penn State ends up winning this one. Matt, any final thoughts before we send the weekend people into their weekend?
No, if you're traveling to the game, enjoy. I'm really bummed. I would have loved to have seen Morgantown. I've heard it's a really fun place to watch a ball game. And I'm excited for both these teams. Again, I think it's cool that this rivalry has been brought back. I think it's cool there's a little bit of bad blood. And I am so excited that we finally get football again. And Bill, I feel like I'm going to have such a good grasp of what Penn State is this time next week, like after we've had time to digest what's going to happen on Saturday. And for a season that I'm going in with, not as high expectations as I was last year, I just feel like there's so much unknown and I'm excited to finally learn more.
Is there a non-Penn State game over these, things really kick off on Thursday? There's a ton of games on
Minnesota,
Thursday.
North Carolina.
Friday. Is there a game this entire weekend that other than Penn State, that you're going to be watching especially closely?
Minnesota, North Carolina, because I think if North Carolina loses that, we are going to start watching the downfall of Mac Brown.
Really?
Drake May's out of there. He's a guy in his 70s. Like, I think Mac's great for college football, but like if North Carolina can't get the job done, I think we can kind of acknowledge that the game is more or less passed him by.
Well, I mean, the thing with UNC is that they've kind of been stuck in the mud
Mhm.
under 7-6, 8-4, 6-7, 9-5, 8-5 with 4 straight bowl losses. So part of me thinks they just don't care about that. But you know, it's possible, and they're 2-point favorites in that one, huh? I got 2 games I'm paying attention to. One, I don't think it was a good idea for Colorado to schedule North Dakota State for their first game of the
Yeah,
season.
that's something, man.
I'm sure this happened. I'm sure that happened years ago, and I assume that Coach Prime probably isn't very happy about it. But they're 10-point favorites. I think they probably win, but I don't know if they cover that. And then I have this pet theory that is based on absolutely nothing. That going in sometime in like February, Miami's AD looked at their football schedule, and Florida's AD looked at their football schedule, and both of them had the exact same thought, which is I really wish we were playing someone else week one, and they probably wanted to call one another and see if they could work something out, but didn't want to be the one who ended up doing that, because whoever loses that football game, their head coach is going to be on the hottest seat in America.
Yep.
And I, for one, cannot wait, because that game is going to be horrible.
Yeah.
And it's going to be very funny. Everything is very funny in week one, as long as Penn State doesn't lose. And then week one is
A nightmare.
And then week one sucks. And then I don't want to do this podcast anymore. And it's great. But we're glad that you all sat down and listened to this edition of the pod. As always, make sure you subscribe wherever you go and get your podcast. If you use Apple Podcasts, leave us a 5-star review over there. Spotify, leave us 5 stars over there. If you go over to YouTube, you want to subscribe to us on YouTube and hop into the comments and talk to people. Talk to people in the YouTube comments. We sometimes get opposing fans who come in, if that happens, and you're a WVU fan.
Welcome. I've never been to your state, but I've
welcome.
heard it's nice.
I'm not going to the game, but if I was, I would be spending far too much money at tutors, which, Matt, you will now be forced to Google tutors after this episode of the podcast. Is one of the best places on earth, and Morgantown is stunning. Campus is awesome. Like, it's beautiful. Love it over there. Wish I could have made it down, but I'll be chopping it up with West Virginia fans throughout this weekend. So whatever. Make sure you're following us over on Twitter at RLR Blog. And as always, thank you to Home Field Apparel for sponsoring us. Use the promo code RLR24 for 15% off of your first order if you've never purchased anything from Home Field Apparel before. One last time, thank you very much for listening to this edition of the pod. For Matt Filipovitz, I'm Bill DeFilippo. Take care, everyone.
Go State.